All right, let's dive into something I think a lot of people struggle with: fear of speaking English in public. We've got your notes and highlights already from that English Unlocked podcast episode, so we're going to do a deep dive into it all, pull out the important stuff, and hopefully when we're done, you'll be feeling empowered instead of overwhelmed.
It really is fascinating how much psychology is tied into learning a language. Like the fear of messing up, the fear of judgment. Those are things everyone feels, but they can really hold people back.
English Unlocked really focused on three main fears: making mistakes, facing that judgment from others, and just not having the confidence. You know that feeling right before you got to speak up in a meeting? Like your heart starts racing.
Yeah.
I think we've all been there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important to just acknowledge those feelings first instead of trying to ignore them. What I found really interesting was how English Unlocked talk about some mindset shifts that can really make difference.
Yeah, let's talk about that. They talk about thinking about mistakes as just part of the learning process, right? So instead of freaking out when you mess up, it's more like, hey, this is my brain making new connections.
Exactly. And it's not just like a feel-good thing to say. There's actually science behind it. Neuroplasticity shows us that our brains are always rewiring themselves based on what we experience.
Right.
So each time you stumble over a word or phrase, you're actually making those pathways stronger in your brain for next time.
So it's like every time I make a mistake, it's actually making me better for next time.
Yeah.
I like that. But what about that pressure to be perfect? I think that's something so many of us get stuck on.
Right. And English Unlocked really makes a point of saying that fluency isn't about being perfect with grammar. It's about connecting with people, being able to share your ideas and build those relationships.
Isn't it more awkward when you're trying to be so perfect that you end up sounding like a robot?
For sure. There's a balance. You know, you can have perfect grammar, but if you sound like a robot and aren't connecting with anyone, then your message isn't going to get across. It's more about communication than perfection. English Unlocked really drove that point home, I think.
They did. Okay, so we talked about mistakes and we talked about perfection. What about that feeling of being totally alone in this?
Yeah, that lack of confidence. And it goes back to the idea that everyone's judging you, which most of the time isn't true. English Unlocked reminds us that most people are way more focused on their own anxieties than on judging your English.
I mean, doesn't everyone get a little nervous when they have to speak in public, even in their native language?
Exactly. It's a normal human thing. And if we think about the psychology of it, empathy plays a big part. Most people have been in situations where they felt uncomfortable with language, so they're going to be understanding, not judgmental.
So we've got these great mindset shifts to help with the fear. But what about actual things we can do? English Unlocked mentioned starting small, like just greeting a colleague in English.
Yeah, that's a good way to start. It's a low-pressure situation that can help you get more confident without being overwhelming.
Okay, so small steps. What else?
Preparation. Preparation is key, especially for stuff like presentations and meetings. English Unlocked was really big on outlining your main points beforehand, so you don't have to think of what you're going to say while you're talking.
So knowing what you want to say and when, like a roadmap.
Exactly. It gives you a sense of control and makes it less likely that you'll freeze up or get flustered.
Yeah.
And then you can focus more on how you say it and how you're connecting with the people you're talking to.
They also talked about positive self-talk.
Right.
Which I think is so important, but how do you make sure it's not just empty words? You know, like, how do you actually make that translate into real confidence?
That's a great question. It might feel a little forced at first, but there's actually a lot of research that shows positive affirmations can really have an impact on our brains. They can help reduce stress hormones, boost your confidence, and even help your brain work better.
Really? So it's not just about feeling good, it's actually changing how your brain functions.
Yeah, you're basically retraining your brain to focus on what's good instead of getting stuck in that loop of self-doubt. Every time you change that thought, like, I'm going to mess this up, to I'm getting better every time I talk, you're changing the way your brain thinks to be more positive.
So instead of beating ourselves up for messing up, we can actually train our brains to be more encouraging and supportive.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It is. And speaking of retraining, English Unlocked had some great exercises to build confidence for public speaking. Ready to talk about those?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, let's get into some of those exercises English Unlocked talked about.
Yeah.
One of them was role-playing.
Role-playing, okay. Yeah, I can see how that would be helpful, but like, isn't that kind of awkward? Who am I going to role-play with?
It might feel a little weird at first, but it really works. And you don't always need another person. You can role-play on your own. The important thing is to imagine yourself in specific situations where you might have to speak English in public.
So, like, if I have to give a presentation at work, I could practice that at home first.
Exactly. Picture the room, the people you're talking to, and actually say the words out loud. Here's a tip. Record yourself while you're doing it.
Record myself. Oh, that sounds scary.
It can be a little cringy, yeah, but it's really helpful. You can hear yourself and figure out what you might be stumbling over, or maybe where your pronunciation needs some work.
Oh, okay. So it's like getting another perspective on how you sound.
Exactly. And if you do have someone you can practice with, like a language partner or a friend who's also learning English, you could do it together and give each other feedback.
So role-playing, check. What else?
English Unlocked also suggested something that might seem kind of old school, mirror practice.
Talking to yourself in the mirror. I remember doing that in speech class in high school.
It might feel a little strange, but it's a great way to work on how fluently you speak and also your body language. Remember, when you speak in public, you're communicating with your whole body, not just your words.
Yeah, I've caught myself making the funniest faces when I practice in the mirror, but it makes me think more about my facial expressions and how I'm using my hands.
That's exactly it. It's about becoming aware of what you're doing with your body, because that's a big part of communication. And sometimes those funny faces actually get your point across really well.
So, mirror practice. Good for what you say and how you say it. What about actually getting out there and talking with other people? English Unlocked mentioned joining a speaking group, which sounds a little intimidating to me.
Yeah, it can be daunting, for sure. But speaking groups can be super helpful. Think of it this way. Everyone there is in the same boat. They're all there to practice their English and get better in a supportive environment. It's a safe space to make mistakes, learn from each other, and celebrate everyone's progress.
Okay, I'm kind of starting to see the appeal. It's like a group of people who really get it. They know what it's like to learn English.
Exactly. And those shared experiences can be really motivating and encouraging.
So we've got all these great exercises, but let's say someone's listening and they have a presentation next week. What are some practical things they can do right now to feel more ready and less freaked out?
Good question. I'd start with what English Unlocked said about outlining your main points. It doesn't have to be a fancy script or anything, just a clear idea of what you want to say and when.
So like a roadmap for the presentation. What about the language itself? Any tips on how to make sure your English is ready?
Yeah, for sure. Think about the specific words you'll be using. Like if it's a presentation about something technical, make sure you're comfortable with all the technical terms.
So if I'm talking about artificial intelligence, I should probably brush up on my AI lingo.
Exactly. Practice saying those words out loud. Make sure you know how to pronounce them right and try to use them in sentences. And don't be afraid to look things up if you're not sure.
Okay, so got the outline, got the vocabulary, and hopefully some more confidence from those exercises. But what about those last-minute jitters? When you're right about to go on and your heart is pounding.
The pre-presentation nerves. Yeah, everyone gets those. There's no magic way to make them completely go away, but there are definitely things you can do to handle that anxiety.
Okay, give me your best tips. I need all the help I can get.
First things first. Breathe. Taking deep, slow breaths can make a huge difference when you're feeling that adrenaline rush. It sounds so basic, but it's powerful.
Sometimes I get so in my head that I forget to even breathe.
It happens to everyone. Those deep breaths can really reset your nervous system, calm your heart rate, and slow down those racing thoughts. It brings you back to the present moment.
Deep breaths, check. What else?
This might sound weird, but make eye contact with friendly faces in the audience.
Wait, so I should actually look at the people I'm talking to. What if they all just have these blank stares?
I know it can be scary, but try to find the people who are smiling, nodding, or just looking interested. They're like your allies in the room.
What a little cheerleading section out there.
Exactly. It can really boost your confidence and help you feel more connected to the people you're talking to.
Okay, you know what? Maybe public speaking in English isn't as terrifying as I always thought.
That's the spirit. And even if you make a mistake or two, and let's face it, you probably will, it's really not a big deal.
It's all about enjoying the process, remembering those mindset shifts we talked about, and just trying to connect with the people listening.
You got it. Now, on top of those pre-presentation tips, English Unlocked also had some longer-term strategies for building confidence in public speaking. Want to talk about those?
Yeah, let's go for it. So we've talked about those last-minute jitters right before a presentation and how to handle those. But what about building confidence over time? English Unlocked talked about speaking groups. We talked about those too. What else did they have?
Well, They really emphasized finding a language partner,
Okay.
someone you can practice with all the time, have conversations with, get feedback from. It's kind of like having a buddy for your English-speaking journey.
I can see how that would be helpful. Does it have to be like a formal thing, though? Like, do I need to find a real English tutor or something?
Not at all. It could be a friend or a colleague, even someone you meet online who's also learning English. The important thing is that they're supportive and encouraging and want to practice with you.
Like a workout buddy, but for English. You can keep each other going and celebrate those little victories.
Exactly. And it's a great way to make friends and connect with people from different cultures, too. English Unlocked also had this idea that might sound a little counterintuitive.
Yeah.
They talked about actually looking for opportunities to speak English in public.
Wait, so you're saying I should do the thing that scares me more to make it less scary?
Yeah, pretty much. It's like anything else.
Yeah.
The more you do it, the more comfortable you get.
So maybe I should volunteer to give that presentation at work or finally join that English conversation group I've been thinking about.
Those are great ideas. It doesn't have to be anything huge at first, though. Maybe just chatting with a coworker in English, ordering your coffee in English, or even practicing a presentation in the mirror. Every little bit helps build those skills and that confidence.
So it's more about facing those situations instead of avoiding them.
Exactly. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Yeah.
And the more you push yourself, the more you realize what you can actually do.
Okay, I'm feeling pretty motivated. You know, as we've been talking, I've been thinking about something that English Unlocked didn't directly say, but that seems to be kind of underneath everything they talked about.
What's that?
What if the fear of speaking English in public is actually covering up a deeper fear?
Ooh, now we're getting deep. I like it. What are you thinking?
Well, maybe it's not really about grammar or pronunciation. What if it's more about being vulnerable, putting yourself out there in another language?
I think you're onto something. It makes sense when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
When we speak another language, we're showing a part of ourselves that might feel less perfect, less under control.
It's like we're taking down our defenses and showing a more real, vulnerable side of ourselves.
And that can be scary, especially in a culture that values being perfect and fluent over being real and vulnerable.
So maybe this whole fear of speaking English in public is actually a chance to accept ourselves more.
I love that way of looking at it. Instead of fighting the fear, we can ask ourselves, what's this fear trying to show me?
Maybe it's showing us how to be nicer to ourselves, to accept our imperfections, and to celebrate the courage it takes to be ourselves, even when it's uncomfortable.
I like that. And maybe it's also a chance to question those ideas that say being fluent means you're worthy. Because the truth is, everyone has something important to say, no matter how good their English is.
Yes, exactly. It's about realizing that our voices matter, our stories matter, and even trying to communicate, even when we make mistakes, is something good.
That's a really powerful message to leave our listeners with. It's not just about getting over the fear of public speaking. It's about being ourselves and sharing our voices with the world.
Well said. We've covered a lot in this deep dive. The fears, the ways to change our thinking, practical tips, those exercises for confidence, and even some deeper thoughts. I feel pretty inspired. How about you?
Me too. It's been great. And remember, it's all a journey, not a destination.
So to everyone listening, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the fear of speaking English in public. We hope you got some good insights, some helpful tips, and maybe even some renewed hope and courage.
And keep practicing, keep learning, keep pushing yourselves, and keep sharing your unique voices.
We're rooting for you all the way.